For many years, Bob Watt has been a leader in the campaign to ensure every child in the state of Washington has a world-class 21st century education. Governor Gregoire asked Bob to play an active role in her own efforts to reshape our education system. And I thought Bob would be just the right person to introduce the governor when she spoke to us today. Unfortunately, as you know, the governor isn't able to be with us, so Bob is going to have to give a really, really long introduction. And I was grateful when Bob agreed to pitch it for the governor. I can't think of anyone more qualified. Please welcome our distinguished member, Boeing Commercial Airplanes Vice President for Community and Government Relations, Bob Watt.
Thank you so much, Bill, for that kind introduction. It's true. It's been my privilege to be involved with young people in learning for a long time, including a stint as a teacher myself in the late 60s and early 70s. So you would think Dave Endicott planned all of this to have all these young people with caring adults who know how important it is about the future. And of course, it would have been a tremendous opportunity for the governor. Alas, because she's the kind of human being she is, she's got a family member in Spokane who needs her attention, and she's there today. It meant writing off not just this speech, but many other things that Tom, I'm sure, would tell you were awful to have to say, I can't do that, but she did. Now, many of you know I volunteer as an auctioneer in my spare time, so I thought I'd just read you the whole Watch and Learns report in auctioneer mode. Not. When the governor called to ask me to chair the Early Learning Council and to be part of the Watch and Learns effort, it was relatively easy to say yes. I was following in a long tradition of Boeing executives. Frank Schranz co-chaired the Governor's Commission on Education that brought us accountability to the Washington State system. John Warner, in his role as Boeing's Chief Administrative Officer, both here and nationwide, had led many efforts to help improve education, and as a matter of fact, John and I are leaving here this afternoon to go award to a Seattle elementary school the John Warner Award for Top Academic Achievement. It's still a secret, so I'm not revealing which school. Named in honor of John because of his fabulous contributions to public education throughout this state and this country. It was also easy to say yes because I know that the Boeing Company makes its living because human beings choose to join us to work, human beings who have spirit, imagination, the capacity to work together in global teams throughout this whole planet, and who can imagine things that never were and have the rigor and discipline to make them real. And if we don't have more and more and more of those kind of people in our state and in our nation, we will fall inexorably behind. So yes, Governor, I'll help. Yes, Governor, I'll attend all the meetings. Yes, Governor, I'll even fill in when necessary when you can't be there. And I thought to myself when I answered those questions, you know, I've been through a couple of these gubernatorial things, and she'll probably come to the first one, and she might kick off a couple of them, and she might even sit through one of the shorter meetings. I'm here to tell you the governor of the state of Washington found the time over an 18-month period to spend sometimes from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and that's how long the meetings went, twice, often in front of cameras just like these that are in the back of the room, chairing a group of people whose job it was to think about the future of education in Washington State, and most especially how to finance it. I'm also here to tell you that when about halfway through that process, the governor, along with all of us, realized just how far away we were from having a system that could be financed effectively in Washington State, she pulled the plug on the finance part and decided to concentrate on the accountability half of the equation, knowing full well that there was no way we, the people, were going to lead on education if we, the people, didn't have more confidence in what public education was able to do to create a better future for all of us. The vision of a seamless, world-class, learner-focused, continuous education system was shamelessly stolen by me from John Stanford and introjected into the Washington Learns process. It appears on the cover of the document, World-Class, Learner-Focused, Seamless Education. And I'm here to tell you that the governor and all my fellow committee members really grappled with what did that mean in an era when, as you know from hearing John Medina speak and Jack just moments ago, we know today that the first 5 years of life are at least as important educationally, if not emotionally, spiritually, morally, ethically, and teamwork-wise, as anything that happens before. Yet we have a state constitution which prescribes that the paramount duty of our state is K-12. What to do in a world where higher education means more and more and more in terms of a human's ability to succeed in the global economy when the state's constitution says that the paramount duty of the state is K-12. What to do in a world where K-12 finance is so complicated that the superintendent of public instruction, a lifelong educator, a dedicated public servant, said the words out loud in front of TV cameras one day at a Washington Learns meeting, "I had no idea it was this big a mess." Well, the answer to the what to do is have a vision, and that vision is spelled out pretty clearly in the Washington Learns report. I have a few copies if you're really a geek. It's also available on the tables. And to take that vision out to the people of the state of Washington and see if it makes sense. So here are the elements of the vision. An early learning system that gets it right for all kids. As Jack noted, 40% of children show up at kindergarten not ready for school. Many of them stay behind their whole life, and many of them are in that horrendous high school dropout rate that Jack referenced. Not only are they not having fun in school, James, they are feeling as if they're a failure. So let's get early learning right. That's all of us, parents, grandparents, child care settings, public schools. The state legislature increased funding for all-day kindergarten as part of getting early learning right, but required the districts that get the money link with the early learning settings in their arena and make sure it's seamless for those kids coming out of formal early learning settings. In the K-12 area, let's focus on math and science. It's no secret now, thanks to the WASL, that our students in Washington State are not succeeding at math and science. And it's no secret that in the world of the future, math and science are going to become more and more and more important. It looks to at least this member of the Washington Learns Steering Committee as if there are many reasons for this, few of which have anything to do with the students' abilities. So we've got big changes to make. Changes in teacher education, changes in curriculum. There are so many math curriculums around our state right now that a child who transfers from one district to another has precious little chance to know that they're in the same grade, much less the same way of teaching math. We've got to get that right. In higher education, we are blessed by two research institutions that really are world-class, by a group of colleges that are among the very best in their competition, and by a community college network that is, in fact, the finest in the United States of America. And we dramatically underfund all three of those elements because K-12 is the paramount duty of our state, and anytime our state's budget gets into crisis, higher ed loses. Early learning really wasn't even part of the equation until this legislative session, when I'm proud to tell you big strides were made in early learning, but we've got a ways to go. If the governor were here, she would tell you that if, as a state, we're going to compete into the future, we have to do better at helping our own students succeed. You all know the statistics about Washington State being among the best educated states in the nation. It's true. We have one of the very highest percentages of bachelor's degree or above amongst our adult population of any state. And most of those kids don't get their degrees here. They get them somewhere else and then they move here. And many of our children can't get into our own institutions of higher education because we've pretty dramatically underfunded the publicly available slots in those research institutions particularly, but also in the 4 years. If it weren't for the community colleges, we'd already be in deep trouble in Washington State on access. So Washington Learns officially presented a series of recommendations to this year's legislature, and I'm proud to tell you most of them were adopted pretty much as is. There were some interesting fights because it's really hard to change a system, and the governor asked us all to stay on because we failed miserably to tackle the financing problem. I also want to tell you that we didn't go far enough, in my view, towards the world-class, seamless, learner-focused system. Thinking of education as early learning, K-12, and higher ed is very 19th century, built on a model when we didn't know what we now know about the importance of the first 5 years of life to the real hard wiring in the brain. I mean, this stuff, as John Medina told you, this isn't just software. This is the hardware of the brain. And if a child does not get the ability to empathize, to connect with other human beings, sometime in the first 3 or 4 years of life, we have a very big problem on our hands throughout life. Not only can't that child work in teams, as we need at Boeing, that child is not very connected to behaving within the law. We can change that. We know how to change that. We all have to make up our minds, is that what we want to do? And so we've been asked to stay on for 18 more months, to stare that funding system in the eyeball and make some big recommended changes. Many of you have probably observed that a number of suburban school districts, not just in the Seattle area, but also east of the mountains, have gotten in financial trouble because the funding system for K-12 is so complicated that in order to give teachers well-deserved raises, they have to reach into pockets they don't have for money that isn't there to pay those bills. I think that's unacceptable, and we, the people, have to decide how to change that. Our state is very expensive for businesses, a point I made over and over to my Washington Learns colleagues. It's among the highest cost states that Boeing does business in. Frankly, it's one of the most costly states to do business in all of the United States of America. Someday we have to stare that fact in the eyeball and make a decision. Are we going to change it, or are we going to leave it where it sits? Someday all of us as individuals are going to have to decide, do we believe the schools of the future, hopefully changing fairly dramatically from a 19th century model, deserve additional funding, and are we willing to pay for it out of our own pockets? I predict that this next 18 months of the Washington Learns process is going to be far more challenging than the last 18 months were. because at the heart of this conversation, it's about money. You saw before you today young people who, in many cases, despite some long odds, and in others with wonderful support from their families, have achieved dramatically. Jack told you one of the things we can do to take that achievement rate up from about 65% of kids to in the near 90% range. In a world where China is graduating more engineers each year than the United States graduates in 5, I'm here to tell you there's no child left to waste. And we know what to do. The question is, will we have the wisdom, the courage, the willingness to make some big changes in order to do it? Thank you very much.
Hey, that's a good sign. Tom Fitzsimmons was clapping. Bob has agreed to answer some questions, and I'm sure you'll have some hard ones.
Jim Spady has one over here.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for your
Hi,
service
Jim.
on Washington Learns. I served 6 years under Gary Locke's version of your commission, the Academic Achievement and Accountability Commission, and I know it's hard work, and I appreciate what you're trying to do. My concern with just the money side, I know you're really focusing on that, is how do you get more performance out of the system for the money that's being spent? And could you address for me what the Washington Learns Commission thinks about, number one, paying teachers in high-demand fields like math and science a market wage, and number two, reforming the tenure system for teachers so that you're not guaranteed lifetime employment after only 2 years of service?
Well, thank you for your service and for the question. So Washington Learns actually recommended that math and science teachers be paid differentially. The governor supported that recommendation. As you know, Jim, from your service, this is not widely regarded by the Washington Education Association, so it was a courageous decision on her part. I honestly think we have to get there. About money. So in early learning and in higher ed, I'm afraid the answer just kind of straight up is we're either going to invest more or we're not. And we probably know how to spend more wisely if we choose. In K-12, we have a lot of work to do to, A, get people's confidence that the system really can produce, and B, maybe even harder, to take a really complete look at what we now call the K-12 system and decide, did we do it right, or do we need to make some really big changes? I forget how many school districts there are in this state. Tom, do you remember? I don't, 290 something. Really, is that a good number? You know, couldn't we lean that out some? Couldn't we find some ways to take out some of the overhead in K-12 and get it into the classroom? I think the answer is probably yes, but I'll also tell you, and I think Don has said this to you in a couple of his speeches about education, people hate their school district, love their teacher, like their principal, but if you threaten their school board with dissolution and make the whole district go away, oh my gosh, they fight like mad. So we chose not to tackle that as part of Washington Learns, but I think ultimately if we're going to get to the point where people will say, yes, more money is needed in the K-12 system, we're going to have to tackle some of those questions too.
Question here from Burr.
Governor Evans was here talking to us a little while back about the idea of forming a new four-year college in the region. Is that going anywhere?
Well, Snohomish County is seeking a new four-year college, and the legislature actually put in a little money to begin that process. There will continue to be a large, interesting debate about is that an freestanding institution or is that a branch? And I think the legislature's money went on branch this year, branch of the University of Washington. Many people in Snohomish County would tell you they want their own Institute of Technology up there. You know, we'll see how that plays out. But if we're going to ultimately solve the access questions that I talked about, part of the answer is additional facilities, but also part of the answer is technology. I mean, let's face it, K-12 particularly, but even higher ed, is way behind in the capacity to deliver information to humans the way these young people now receive it. I mean, the University of Washington is delivering lectures on iPods now, and but imagine in a world where connectivity is good, bandwidth is good. We know from some research down at the University of Washington, for example, that it's not a good idea to try and have kids learning off screens below the age of 5 or 6. But after that, there's an awful lot you can do that would change the way things are delivered. That might mean we need a new college because it's a real economic boost to a region, but we might be able to do college very differently from the way we've done it in the past.
Sally Bagshaw in the far end of the room.
Bob, I completely agree with you on your objectives. My question is, what would your recommendation be on the tax source? We're feeling taxpayer ennui with property tax and sales tax. We have the huge transportation votes coming up. How do we get where you want to go?
Oh, yes, watch Bob dance. Right now, the Prosperity Partnership is meeting, and several of our members, Erwin Triger among them, are there to discuss a tax proposal that, if it holds up to analysis, looks like it could reduce the state property tax to 0, take down the B&O to 0 if we wanted it, and replace those taxes with a tax that gets to both individuals and businesses. Income tax is not the right word to call what's being batted around. It's not. I mean, it's, you know, and I'm really not at full liberty to share that thought. But I will say, in the states that have found a way to have thriving business climates and fund their education systems pretty well, there is a more balanced taxation system that does have individuals paying a little more than they do in Washington State and businesses paying a little less.
One more. Brenda?
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
I'm here today because my wonderful 2-year-old is in daycare. Was daycare included in Washington Learns, and how are you going to educate parents about what they should look for in daycare?
You bet. I'm proud to say that a new Department of Early Learning was formed as a result of Washington Learns, that a new quality rating and improvement system statewide was put in place as a result of Washington Learns, and soon you will be able to know much better, in a much more transparent way, the quality of a particular child care that you might be interested in putting your child in. And finally, as I noted, there's money in this budget to go to all-day kindergarten in districts around the state, particularly districts with many low-income children. And they're required, as part of getting that money, to link with their early learning daycare centers in their community. And I will tell you that a community that's done that really well is Bremerton. The Bremerton superintendent has been a remarkable leader at getting with the daycare institutions in her community, linking curriculum back and forth, helping the teachers and the child cares know what to help prepare the children for, and the results by grade 4 are stunning. The kids at Bremerton are doing way better than they were doing before this process began. So this is where we've got more work to do on Seamless. And you know, I'm glad that you probably did a lot of research about what child care your child would be in. The quality rating and improvement system is going to make that easier for every parent in the state of Washington.
Thanks,
Bill.
Bob. Thanks for your leadership, for your hard work. Hold up the books. If you want a book, Bob has them, or they're on the table in the back. I want to, before we end the meeting today, I would like to ask our Winners for Life scholarship winners to please come up on stage with me, if you would be so kind. Because you're beautiful and everybody needs a chance to see you, and you're not very tall. Come up here where they could see you. Come on over here. We're so proud of you. You all have done remarkable things, and you're going to continue to do remarkable things, and we just wish you all the best. And I'd like one last time all of the great scholars, the top 100 scholars in our Seattle Public Schools, please stand up so we can give you one more round of applause. Thank you very much. Well, that is a great meeting. Bob, you're terrific. We really appreciate you, and we appreciate your service. Congratulations to all these fabulous young people. Thanks to everybody who participated in our program this week. We have another great program next week. We're going to be at the Fifth Avenue Theater. We're grateful to them for accommodating us. Convention business is booming in Seattle, and so we had to scramble for a venue. I'm hoping Linda Ruff will lead us in another rendition of Northwest Dixie, because our guest speaker next week will be Bill Ruckelshaus, and he's going to be here to talk about the Puget Sound Partnership, and I know that hearing that Northwest Dixie would put a big smile on his face. So sing well. That brings us to this week's pretty good rule. Always look for the courage to say and do the right thing, regardless of the consequences to you. See you next week. We are adjourned.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from Enterprise Seattle. For over 35 years, Enterprise Seattle has provided client-based economic development services to businesses throughout King County and its 39 cities. More information on Enterprise Seattle and how they help businesses grow and prosper can be found at www.enterpriseseattle.org. And by First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.